Hello and welcome. Before we get into today's stories, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The man never saw her coming. Tanpan stood at the intersection of Murray and King Streets in Perth waiting to cross. It was Saturday evening, May 31st, 2025, just after 8:40 p.m. His back was turned toward the footpath. The city was busy, loud and crowded. Nothing about the moment suggested it would be his last. Behind him, an electric scooter came fast along the sidewalk. Witnesses later described the impact as sudden and violent. The scooter slammed into Tan with enough force to spin him around before he hit the pavement. His head struck the ground. Nearby pedestrians froze. A young woman was thrown from the scooter and lay motionless on the concrete. The rider stayed upright. Her name was Alicia Kemp. Earlier that afternoon, Alicia Kemp had been drinking. She was 24 years old, living in Perth on a 4-month working holiday visa. Originally from Reddick, England, a town of roughly 80,000 people south of Birmingham, Alicia had graduated in 2022 with a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in forensic mental health. After college, she spent time overseas, volunteering at an animal shelter in the Philippines and working as an English teacher in Vietnam. By 2024, she had arrived in Australia and found work at Dirty Nellie's Irish pub on Murray Street, in Perth's central business district. On May 31st, she was out drinking with a 26-year-old friend. At 2:30 p.m, the two women entered a bar called the Beaufort, where they took part in a promotion allowing unlimited alcohol for 2 hours. When they left, the drinking continued. Over the course of the afternoon and evening, they moved between bars in the CBD, becoming increasingly intoxicated. Twice, staff at other venues refused them entry because of their condition. The final refusal happened around 8 p.m, near the intersection of William and Murray Streets. 30 minutes later, Alicia rented an electric scooter through a mobile app. Security footage captured what happened next. Alicia and her friend appeared to have access to 2 scooters, but they attempted to use only one. Alicia struggled to steady the scooter, while her friend stumbled repeatedly on the footpath and into the street. She had difficulty standing and walking, and when she tried to climb onto the scooter behind Alicia, both women fell to the ground. Eventually, they managed to get back on. Alicia took control of the scooter. Her friend stood behind her as a passenger. The scooter accelerated along the sidewalk on Murray Street. Data later showed it reached speeds of up to 15 miles per hour. Under Perth regulations, electric scooters are permitted on sidewalks, but the speed limit is 6 miles per hour, and riders must give way to pedestrians. Alicia did not. Video showed her weaving through foot traffic as pedestrians stepped aside to avoid being struck. At one point, she crossed a street without slowing down or checking for traffic. A car passed within a few feet of her at the intersection. Police later described her driving as inexplicably dangerous. As the scooter approached the intersection of Murray and King Streets, Tanpan was standing ahead, waiting to cross. He was 51 years old, a structural engineer, and the primary financial provider for his family. He never turned around. The collision sent him spinning. He fell backward and struck his head on the pavement. Alicia's passenger was thrown from the scooter and knocked unconscious. She suffered a skull fracture and a broken nose. At first, it appeared that Tan's injuries were minor. They were not. Instead of staying with the injured or seeking help, Alicia left. She continued her night out, going to multiple bars and drinking into the early morning hours of Sunday, June 1st, 2025. Meanwhile, Tanpan was taken to Royal Perth Hospital. His condition deteriorated rapidly. He had suffered severe brain injuries. 2 days later, he died. When police connected the severity of his injuries to the scooter collision, Alicia Kemp was arrested. Testing showed her blood alcohol concentration at the time of the incident was approximately 0.185%, more than 3 times Australia's legal limit of 0.05%. Under Australian law, electric scooters are classified as motor vehicles for the purposes of drink driving offences. She was charged with dangerous driving causing death while under the influence of alcohol, dangerous driving causing bodily harm while under the influence of alcohol. The incident was believed to be the first pedestrian death caused by an electric scooter in Australia, and the first of its kind in Western Australia.
Sorry for what happened. It's not a second that's gone past that she hasn't felt the pain of what she's done. She feels for the family. She's not quarrelling with the amount of time. She understands she's going to be punished for what she's done. She's just incredibly sorry.
On August 11th, 2025, Alicia Kemp pleaded guilty to dangerous driving causing death under the influence of alcohol. The second charge, related to the injuries suffered by her passenger, was dismissed by the prosecution, citing the low likelihood of securing a conviction. Alicia was remanded in custody without bond. The offence carried a maximum possible penalty of 20 years in prison. She waited. On December 12th, 2025, Alicia Kemp returned to court for sentencing. Details about Tanpan's life were presented. He was married and the primary provider for his household. He and his wife had 2 autistic children, aged 18 and 20. His eldest son repeatedly asked when his father was coming home. The court acknowledged that Alicia had no prior criminal history and had pleaded guilty early in the process. The judge stated that there was no malicious intent behind her actions. Alicia Kemp was sentenced to 4 years in prison, with a non-parole period of 2 years. With credit for time already served, she became eligible for release as early as mid-2027. Her driver's licence was suspended for 2 years. Alicia Kemp will eventually leave prison. Tanpan will not. For his family, the loss did not end with the court proceedings. The consequences of that night on Murray Street extend far beyond the intersection where a scooter struck a pedestrian who never saw it coming. The city moved on, the case closed, the damage remained. Chandra Nagamalaya was running for his life. Blood streamed down his arms and torso as he bolted from room 108, the sharp, blinding swings of a machete close behind him. He screamed, voice cracking, as Jordanis Cobos Martinez lunged again and again, hacking with the kind of feral intensity that left no room for mercy. The motel parking lot stretched ahead, a mix of asphalt and scattered morning light, and Chandra's only thought was reaching the front office, to get to his wife, to get to his son, to survive. Jordanis was relentless. Witnesses would later describe him as moving with terrifying focus, his every step fueled by sudden rage over something so small, so meaningless, a perceived disrespect, a need to be addressed directly. But in that moment, reason had no place. Chandra stumbled, nearly collapsing, but pushed forward, dragging his legs across the pavement. Guests who had just begun their mornings froze in horror, phones in hand, capturing the nightmare in real time. By the time Chandra reached the office door, his wife and Guav were stepping out, drawn by the screams. Panic filled their eyes, but it was too late. Jordanis crashed into them, shoving Chandra's family aside as if they were nothing, continuing his attack. Hands grasped, struggled, pulled. Futile resistance against pure, frenzied violence. Then came the unthinkable. Chandra fell to the ground, his body battered, bloodied, the machete rising for the final strike. Seconds later, the unimaginable occurred. Chandra's life ended in a moment of horrifying brutality. Jordanis paused only to rifle through Chandra's pockets, taking his phone and keys before returning to the carnage. And then, in a chilling, almost casual finality, Jordanis removed Chandra's head. He held it, stared at it, and in front of everyone he kicked it across the asphalt like a grotesque soccer ball, finally tossing it into a dumpster nearby. All of it. The running, the screaming, the swings of the machete, the final mutilation, happened in a blur in minutes, captured in excruciating detail by surveillance cameras that would later horrify investigators and the public alike. By 8:35 a.m., Dallas police had closed in on Jordanis Cobos Martinez. Covered in blood and still clutching the bloody machete, he was apprehended just a block away from the motel. Witnesses watched as officers moved in with caution, but he offered no resistance. In his hands they found Chandra's mobile phone, a grim, tangible link to the carnage he had just wrought. Within minutes, he was in custody, and the scene at the motel slowly began to settle into an eerie stillness, leaving the staff, guests and Chandra's family in shock. Investigators immediately began processing the crime scene. Forensic teams worked meticulously, documenting the mutilated remains, collecting blood samples, and securing surveillance footage. Cameras from the motel provided an unflinching record of the attack, capturing not only the initial chase from room 108 to the front office, but also the moments after, when Chandra lay on the ground and the attacker paused to rifle through his pockets. In the hours that followed, officers began interviewing witnesses. Guests who had watched in horror recounted the scene with trembling voices. The sheer speed of the attack, the frenzied swings of the machete, and the moment when Chandra's severed head was kicked across the parking lot.
He got over on the top of him, and then he hit him again, hit him on the foot. Then he trying to split. He was going to go vertical, and he was going to try to split his head. But I guess he changed his mind on that, and then he started just whacking at his neck.
Not at all. Because he didn't. The person that did it didn't seem like he's capable of doing that. Very quiet, cleaned the rooms, went home. That was it. And the guy that was killed, he was nice, was about business, stayed out the way, didn't cause anyone no harm. So. Yeah.
The emotional weight on Chandra's wife and son was immediately evident. Both had tried to intervene, but the scale of violence had been overwhelming. Officers noted their trauma, arranging for immediate support services while continuing the investigation. Meanwhile, the focus turned to Jordanis's background. Police and ICE officials pieced together his criminal history, revealing arrests across multiple states for violent offences, carjacking, indecency, and false imprisonment. Despite this extensive record, he had been released earlier in the year under ICE supervision because Cuba refused to accept him. The revelation sent ripples through the community. How had someone with such a violent past been living freely in Dallas? Investigators quickly realized this was a case not only of a horrific crime, but also of systemic failures that had allowed a dangerous individual to remain on US soil. By late morning, Jordanis was formally charged with capital murder, a crime in Texas that carried the possibility of the death penalty or life without parole. Jordanis was swiftly booked into Dallas County Jail, with an ICE detainer ensuring he remained in federal custody. Media coverage exploded, spotlighting the shocking brutality caught on camera and the public's horror for Chandra's family. Investigators quickly determined the motive, a trivial argument over a broken washing machine that escalated into uncontrollable rage. In the following days, prosecutors prepared a capital murder case backed by overwhelming evidence, CCTV footage, eyewitnesses, forensic proof, and Jordanis's confession, while the community grappled with the enormity of the tragedy. The sheer clarity of the case left little doubt about guilt, but the focus quickly shifted to questions of punishment, mental state, and how someone with such a criminal history had avoided permanent incarceration. Meanwhile, Chandra's family grappled with the unimaginable loss. His wife and son, Guav, were left not only mourning a husband and father, but also processing the trauma of witnessing the attack firsthand. Friends, relatives, and even motel staff came together, offering support, sharing stories of Chandra's warmth, humour, and unwavering dedication to his family and work. Within 3 days, the funeral service was held, a solemn gathering marked by tears, prayers, and memories of a man who had brought kindness into the lives of everyone around him. Community members and strangers alike contributed to an online fundraiser to help cover funeral costs and provide for Guav's future, a testament to how deeply Chandra had touched lives. Legal experts debated mental competency and the potential for an insanity defense, but the defense had little room to contest. Public outrage, fueled by media and social media coverage, focused on the brutality of the murder, Jordanis' violent past, and systemic failures that had allowed him to remain free. The focus of the courtroom would likely be sentencing, with prosecutors pushing for the death penalty and defense possibly exploring insanity claims, though guilt was unquestioned. Ultimately, the Dallas decapitation case became a grim symbol of uncontrolled violence, the need for systemic safeguards, and a testament to Chandra's enduring memory. It's a cold March morning in Tokyo, 1995, rush hour. The subways are packed with millions of commuters, office workers, students, parents, all moving through one of the most efficient train systems in the world. But inside the crowd, among the suits and backpacks, are 5 men carrying something far deadlier than anyone could have imagined. Each holds a simple-looking package, wrapped in newspaper, so ordinary it blends right into the chaos of the station. Hidden inside, though, is liquid sarin, one of the most lethal nerve agents ever created, a chemical weapon originally developed in Nazi Germany during the 1930s. At 7:46 a.m., one of them, Ikuo Hayashi, a former heart surgeon, boards the Chiyoda line. Another man, Kenichi Hiro, steps onto the Marunouchi line. 3 others are spread across different trains, all heading toward Tokyo's central government district. Each of them places their package carefully at their feet. Then, in an act that seems almost too casual for what's about to unfold, they pull out sharpened umbrella tips and puncture the bags. Slowly, quietly, the liquid begins to seep out, evaporating into invisible death. The effects are immediate. Passengers cough. Some start rubbing their eyes, their vision blurring. A woman vomits. Another collapses against the wall. At first, people think it's motion sickness. Maybe someone spreading the flu, but it's not. Within minutes, chaos erupts. Foam at the mouth, convulsions, bodies dropping onto the floor of train cars, and the worst part? No one knows what's happening. No alarms, no announcements, just the sudden terrifying sense that something is very, very wrong. And this isn't happening on just one train, it's 5. 5 different cars, 5 different lines, all releasing sarin into Tokyo's most crowded subway routes at the exact same time. Thousands are being poisoned before anyone even knows they're under attack. The poison spreads silently, almost invisibly, through the cars of Tokyo's subway. At first, nobody really knew what was happening. Passengers thought maybe it was a leak, maybe cleaning fluid, maybe something harmless. But then the symptoms hit like a wave. People began coughing violently, their eyes tearing up, some vomiting right there on the floor. Others suddenly collapsed, twitching and gasping for breath. On the Marunouchi line, commuters staggered out onto the platform, blinded and choking. At Kasumigaseki station, victims collapsed before the train even came to a complete stop. One station worker, Kazumasa Takahashi, saw a leaking package and, thinking it was just some strange liquid, picked it up and tossed it into the trash. Minutes later, he fell unconscious and died. Everywhere there was confusion. Emergency responders weren't immediately sure what they were dealing with. Passengers who had been exposed on one train transferred to others, spreading contamination further. 40 minutes after the attack, first responders were finally told to wear gas masks, but by then the damage was done. The sarin had already seeped into crowded cars, stations, and even onto the clothes and skin of thousands of unsuspecting Tokyo commuters. Panic spread as fast as the poison, and what had started as an ordinary rush hour turned into one of the worst mornings in Japan's modern history. As ambulances raced through Tokyo's streets, the true scale of the disaster began to unfold. Victims poured into hospitals by the hundreds, eyes burning, bodies convulsing, lungs desperate for air. Doctors and nurses had never seen anything like it. Many had no idea what kind of toxin they were dealing with, only that people were dying fast. Some patients arrived walking, insisting they were fine, only to collapse minutes later. Others were carried in unconscious, their breathing shallow, skin slick with sweat. The chaos was indescribable. Hallways filled with stretchers, relatives screamed for help, and medical staff scrambled to triage. Hospitals ran out of antidotes and protective gear almost immediately. In fact, many doctors themselves were exposed. Some collapsed while treating patients, their masks and gloves proving useless against the potency of sarin. At St. Luke's International Hospital, one of the main emergency centres, doctors worked without rest, improvising treatments and relying on little more than adrenaline and instinct. By the end of the day, 13 people were dead. But the true toll was far greater. Over 6,000 men, women and children had been injured. many suffering long-term effects on their nerves, eyesight, and memory. Tokyo, one of the safest cities in the world, had been turned into a war zone overnight. The subway attack threw Tokyo into a state of fear. People avoided trains, businesses shut early, and the once bustling streets felt eerily silent. But while the city mourned and panicked, Japanese authorities were already mobilizing. Someone had orchestrated this nightmare, and they weren't going to let it go unanswered. Investigators quickly traced the attack to the doomsday cult Shinrikyo. For years, whispers about the group had circulated. Strange rituals, shady dealings, and a charismatic leader who claimed to be a modern-day prophet. But until now, the cult had largely been dismissed as eccentric, even harmless. That illusion was shattered the moment sarin gas seeped into Tokyo's veins. Raids began almost immediately. Police stormed Shinrikyo compounds across Japan, searching for chemicals, weapons, and evidence of the attack. What they found was chilling. Hidden laboratories, massive stockpiles of nerve agents, and even blueprints for weapons of mass destruction. The cult wasn't just a fringe religious group. They were preparing for war. The cult's leader, Shoko Asahara, became the prime target. Blind in one eye, overweight, and with an unkempt beard, he looked more like a recluse than a mastermind. But his followers believed he was a messiah destined to survive an apocalyptic war. Under his command, Shinrikyo had built a network of scientists, engineers, and chemists, all willing to die or kill for his vision. Police faced a terrifying reality. This wasn't an isolated attack. The cult had the resources, the knowledge, and the will to strike again. Every raid brought more evidence of their capabilities. Chemical plants disguised as research centers, stockpiles of weapons-grade materials, and cult members who resisted with chilling devotion. The hunt for Shinrikyo was no longer just about justice for the subway victims. It was a race against time to stop whatever horror Asahara had planned next. Shoko Asahara wasn't born into power. He crafted it. Born Chizuo Matsumoto in 1955, partially blind and raised in poverty, he grew up with a fierce hunger for recognition. He studied acupuncture and dabbled in alternative medicine, but what set him apart was his obsession with spirituality. By the mid-1980s, he reinvented himself as Shoko Asahara, claiming to be the one true prophet who could lead humanity through the coming apocalypse. He blended elements of Buddhism, Hinduism, and even Christianity, preaching a doomsday vision where only his followers would survive. Charismatic and manipulative, Asahara lured in thousands, students, scientists, and even doctors, convincing them to give up everything for his cause. For many, he wasn't just a teacher. He was salvation. Under Asahara's rule, Shinrikyo transformed into something far darker than a spiritual retreat. Members lived in isolated compounds, cut off from family and outside influence. They were forced into strict routines of meditation, fasting, and grueling labor. Dissent wasn't tolerated. Anyone who questioned Asahara faced brutal punishments, sometimes even death. He demanded loyalty in every aspect of their lives, arranging marriages, seizing wealth, and dictating every decision. At the same time, his inner circle of highly educated followers worked tirelessly to arm the cult. Laboratories churned out chemical weapons, while Asahara preached about the end of the world, stoking paranoia and absolute obedience. By the early 1990s, he had not only created a religion, but a fully operational militarized cult willing to kill at his command. On the morning of March 20th, 1995, Shinrikyo members boarded trains carrying plastic bags filled with liquid sarin, a nerve agent so lethal that just a few drops could kill. At coordinated stops, they punctured the bags with sharpened umbrellas and fled, leaving the poison to seep across the train floors. Within minutes, chaos erupted. Passengers collapsed, choking, blinded, and convulsing as the invisible gas spread through the tunnels. 13 people lost their lives, while more than 6,000 were injured. Shoko Asahara was arrested, put on trial, and ultimately sentenced to death, along with several senior cult members.
The attack, police stormed the cult's compound in central Japan and other facilities across the country. A massive investigation led to the indictment of about 200 people on a slew of charges.
This helicopter, bought second-hand for $1 million, was another Russian souvenir. Also around this time, the ORM was gaining members within Japan's own defence forces. Soldiers helped steal industrial secrets for research on laser, biological and nuclear weapons, and formed a commando unit with the idea of assassinating the emperor and staging a coup d'etat.
Halloween night, 2017. Police knock on the door of a tiny apartment in Zama, Japan. The man who answers looks ordinary enough, soft-spoken, almost harmless. They ask about a missing young woman, and he doesn't even flinch. Instead, he calmly nods toward a cooler sitting just inside his room. "She's in there," he says. When officers lift the lid, they find a human head staring back at them, and scattered across the apartment. More boxes, more coolers, all hiding the same horrifying truth. What looked like a modest, quiet apartment was in fact a slaughterhouse, home to one of Japan's most infamous modern killers. That man was Takahiro Shiraishi, later branded the Twitter Killer. Born in 1990 in the city of Zama, he grew up in a perfectly average household with his parents and younger sister. Teachers remembered him as polite but forgettable. Classmates said he wasn't brilliant, wasn't a troublemaker, just a quiet kid who blended in with the background. But there were hints. For fun, he and his friends sometimes choked each other until they almost blacked out. Just goofing around, they'd say. But disturbing even then. His parents' divorce during his teenage years seemed to hit him harder than most, leaving him withdrawn. After high school, he drifted through ordinary jobs, supermarkets, pachinko parlors, until he made a sharp turn into Tokyo's underworld. There, in Kabukicho, the red light district controlled by the Yakuza, he became a scout, tricking vulnerable women into sex work. People who knew him during this time described two sides: a strangely gentle man fascinated by death, and a cold, ambitious manipulator willing to betray anyone for gain. By 2017, Takahiro was back home in Zama, living with his father after a suspended sentence for his trafficking work. But his fascination with death only deepened. "I don't know why I'm alive," he once told his father. In August that year, claiming he had met the love of his life, he convinced his dad to co-sign on a tiny apartment. It was less than a mile from where he grew up, but inside it would become something unrecognizable. Alone in that small, silent room, Takahiro turned to the internet. In September, he created a Twitter account under the name Hanging Pro, complete with an anime-style picture of a man with scars and a noose. His bio read, "I want to help those who are having a hard time. DM me." His pinned post, a sympathetic message about bullying, depression and suicides, and a carefully crafted bait. To anyone in pain, it looked like an offer of comfort. To Shiraishi, it was a net to catch his prey. The account was convincing. He retweeted cute pictures of dogs and cats, mixed with posts about self-harm. On the surface, it could have been just another troubled soul reaching out online, maybe even a friend to those struggling. But hidden beneath that facade was a predator. Among the people who noticed him was Aiko Tamura, a 23-year-old still grieving the recent death of her mother. Lonely, devastated, and spiraling, she messaged Hanging Pro about forming a suicide pact. A month later, in October, she vanished. Her brother knew something was wrong. Desperate, he broke into her Twitter account and found private messages with Shiraishi. That discovery turned worry into sheer panic. The name Hanging Pro suddenly wasn't just another anonymous online handle, it was the last person Aiko had ever spoken to. Her brother ran to the police with the evidence. Investigators soon uncovered CCTV footage from October 23rd, showing Aiko walking beside a young man toward a quiet apartment building. She was never seen again. As the search for Aiko intensified, another woman came forward. She'd also met Hanging Pro in person, but had only gone on a walk with him. Now, with police guidance, she agreed to set a trap, meeting him again, this time at his apartment. Halloween night, in a city full of masks and costumes, the real monster was walking free with nothing to hide. Police staked out the scene, waiting for the right moment. When the woman entered Takahiro's apartment, officers moved in quickly. What they discovered behind the door would change everything. Inside the cramped one-room apartment, the stench was overwhelming. Coolers, boxes, and bags filled the space, stacked in corners and hidden under blankets. Opening them revealed heads, limbs, and bones. 9 victims in total. Neighbours had complained of foul smells for weeks, but never imagined something like this. At first, Shiroishi's defense team tried a bizarre argument. These weren't murders, but assisted suicides. They claimed he had only helped people who already wanted to die. But Takahiro himself broke that illusion. In interrogation, he admitted bluntly, none of the victims wanted to die when it came down to it. He killed them because he wanted to, for money and for sex. His methods were disturbingly efficient.
9 dismembered bodies were discovered by Japanese police in an apartment near Tokyo. Police say the 27-year-old who lived there, Takahiro Shiraishi, confessed to mutilating the bodies of 8 women and 1 man and hiding them in coolers. Some of the remains were covered with cat litter, according to a police spokesperson. Neighbors said that they had noticed foul smells emanating from the apartment but did not report them. Police believe a missing 23-year-old woman, who had reportedly messaged Shiraishi on Twitter seeking a suicide pact, is among the bodies.
He lured vulnerable people online, promised them understanding, then invited them over. He drugged them with alcohol, sleeping pills, or tranquilizers. When they were unconscious, he strangled them. Then, methodically, he dismembered their bodies. The first victim took him 3 days to cut apart. By the last, he could finish in a single night. He kept bones and body parts in coolers, while dumping flesh and organs in the trash, masked with kitty litter. In just 2 months, he killed 9 people, 8 women and 1 man, who had made the mistake of confronting him about his missing girlfriend. One victim was only 15 years old. For neighbours, the horror was in hindsight. The always-on bathroom fan, the constant trash bags, the strange smell nobody wanted to question. When brought to trial, Takahiro didn't bother denying anything. He told investigators, "Everything the police say is true. I did it all. Psychologists examined him for months but concluded he was fully sane. He knew exactly what he was doing. The jury agreed, sentencing him to death by hanging, Japan's ultimate punishment."
A man has been sentenced to death in Japan for the murders of 9 people in 2017, ending a case that grabbed local headlines as the Twitter killer. 30-year-old Takahiro Shiraishi was found guilty of murdering, dismembering, and storing the bodies of the victims in his apartment outside Tokyo. According to the GG news agency, the prosecution said Shiraishi first contacted the 9 on Twitter after they expressed suicidal thoughts. The agency also says he used a handle that loosely translates to hangman, and that Shiraishi invited the victims to his home, promising to help them die. Kyoto News reported that his defense lawyers argued he killed the victims with their approval. The judge ruled the victims did not consent to being killed, and that Shiraishi was mentally fit to be held responsible for their murders. One juror in the case spoke to the media on Wednesday.
When I listened to his testimony, it made me imagine the killings he committed inside my head. Sometimes I remembered the savage ways he committed the murders at night, so it was a bit of a burden on me.
According to Japanese media, Shiraishi said before the trial that even if he was handed the death penalty, he would not appeal. In Japan, the death penalty is carried out by hanging, with the execution dates not made public until after it happens.
Even then, he showed almost no remorse. He admitted he felt sorry for a few victims, but quickly added that his real regret was simply getting caught. If not for the sting operation, he said, he would still be killing. While he was sitting on death row, incredibly, he receives fan mail and even talked about wanting to marry. A monster disguised as an ordinary man, one who preyed on society's most vulnerable, offering them false compassion only to drag them into his web. His victims sought hope, but instead they found him. He was hanged on June 27, 2025. Andrew Gosden was born on July 10, 1993 in Doncaster, South Yorkshire. His parents, Kevin and Glenys, raised him in a modest family home alongside his younger sister Charlotte. Life in Doncaster was steady, and from the start Andrew seemed different. Quiet, thoughtful, and unusually intelligent. By the time he entered school, teachers quickly recognised his ability. He joined a special programme designed for the top 5% of students. Mathematics came almost effortlessly to him, and though he did well in every subject, numbers gave him particular satisfaction. He often breezed through lessons, leaving teachers struggling to keep him challenged. Still, Andrew was not arrogant about his abilities. He was a boy who blended into the background, small in stature and reserved in manner, with a tendency to avoid unnecessary attention. Yet beneath the quiet exterior was a sharp mind, one that dreamed of bigger challenges. His goal, already fixed by his early teens, was to study mathematics at Cambridge. Though brilliant, Andrew was not without difficulties. His eyesight was very poor, and his strong prescription glasses became a permanent fixture. He was also deaf in one ear, something that made him more withdrawn in group situations. Despite these setbacks, he never let his impairments define him. Andrew's interest reflected his personality. He spent hours absorbed in video games, often on his PlayStation Portable, which he carried everywhere. Music fascinated him too, especially heavy metal bands. His school bag, covered in patches of his favourite groups, stood out as one of the few personal statements he made. He had once been a Cub Scout, but a few months before September 2007, he told his father he no longer wished to attend. Andrew had always been dependable and predictable. He told his parents where he was going, kept a perfect school attendance record, and rarely strayed far from home. But around 14, small signs of restlessness began to appear. The summer of 2007 offered a glimpse of Andrew's changing inner world. His parents suggested he take a trip to London to visit his grandmother. He refused. They thought little of it at the time, but in hindsight it suggested a reluctance, or perhaps a quiet independence, growing inside him. As the new school year began in September, Andrew deviated from routine in subtle but noticeable ways. Twice in 1 week, he walked the 4 miles home instead of taking the bus. He gave no reason for the change, and his parents didn't press him. Looking back, it was one of the first hints that Andrew's carefully predictable patterns were beginning to shift. On the evening of September 13th, 2007, everything seemed normal. Andrew sat with his father working on a jigsaw puzzle, then later curled up with his mother to watch comedy shows. He went to bed as usual, giving no sign that the next morning would change everything. Friday dawned, and Andrew was different. He seemed tired and irritable, uncharacteristically slow to rise from bed. At 8:05 a.m, he left home for school. A witness spotted him walking across Westfield Park toward the bus stop. But Andrew never boarded the bus. Instead, he made his way to a local garage, where he withdrew £200 from a cash machine, almost all the money in his account. CCTV footage captured him heading back home immediately afterward. Inside the house, he took careful, deliberate steps. He removed his school uniform, placed his blazer and tie neatly on a chair, and put the rest into the washing machine. Then he dressed in black jeans and a black t-shirt, slipped on his trainers, and packed his familiar bag. Into it went his PSP, wallet, and keys. Notably, he left behind his PSP charger, an additional £100 in cash he had been saving, and his passport. By 8:30 a.m, Andrew was walking again, this time toward Doncaster railway station. At the station, Andrew approached the ticket counter and asked for a ticket to London. The clerk suggested a return, pointing out it was only 50p more than the one-way fare. Andrew declined. He wanted a single ticket only. At 9:35 a.m, he boarded the train. Witnesses remember a quiet boy, small and neat in appearance, sitting calmly with his console in hand. He spoke to no one and gave no sign of anxiety or distress. Back in Doncaster, his school noticed his absence and attempted to call home. But a misdial meant the message never reached his parents. Kevin and Glenys assumed Andrew was in school, just as the teachers assumed he was at home. The error bought Andrew precious hours of anonymity. At 11:20 a.m, the train rolled into King's Cross. 5 minutes later, CCTV captured Andrew leaving the station through the main entrance. He stepped into the noise and bustle of London. From that moment, Andrew Gosden disappeared. At home, the Gosdens went about their day, believing Andrew was either at school or back at the house. It wasn't until evening, when they realised he hadn't come downstairs, that alarm bells rang. They called friends, only to learn Andrew had not been in school at all. At 7 p.m, they contacted the police. Neighbours and relatives joined the search, combing local parks and streets. No one knew that Andrew had already travelled 170 miles away. When police began their inquiries, their first suspicion fell unfairly on the family. Time was lost as Kevin Gosden was treated as a possible suspect. Eventually, CCTV and witness accounts confirmed Andrew's solo journey to London. From there, the trail went cold. His bank account showed no further activity. His PSP had never been connected online. He had no email address, no social media, and no electronic trace of planning. The one-way ticket remained the only clear statement of intent. Appeals were made, posters distributed, and the case drew national attention. But no confirmed sighting of Andrew has ever surfaced after that brief moment outside King's Cross. Years have passed since September 14th, 2007, yet Andrew's fate remains unknown. The boy who seemed destined for Cambridge, who excelled in mathematics and lived quietly with his family, simply stepped out of his life and vanished. His disappearance has become one of Britain's most haunting modern mysteries. For his parents and sister, the pain is sharpened by the absence of answers. What drew Andrew to London? Did he plan to meet someone? Or was it an impulsive decision that went tragically wrong? The CCTV footage remains frozen in time. A slim teenager in black, glasses perched on his face, walking calmly out of King's Cross station into the city and into the unknown. The disappearance of Andrew Gosden is not just a case file or a mystery captured on grainy CCTV. It is the story of a boy, bright, reserved, full of potential, who stepped away from the familiar rhythm of his life and walked into silence. What unsettles so deeply about Andrew's case is not simply that he vanished, but that he left so few traces of why. A child so consistent, so dependable, suddenly chose secrecy. His tidy uniform folded away, his blazer draped neatly over a chair, his one-way ticket clutched in hand, all hint at intention, but stop short of explanation. For his family, every day since September 14th, 2007, has been lived in the tension between hope and grief.
Every single day feels like a battle. It is a daily struggle for me every morning just to feel like I want to be alive.
Andrew was 14 when he went missing. His dad thought he was setting off to school, not knowing their brief goodbye at the door would become a final farewell.